Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Chris Stone. I'm the community lead, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. Now, Nick, it felt like Thanksgiving fell a little bit late this year compared to previous years, but this last week was lots of football. Thursday night, Friday night, big rivalry games on Saturday, NFL games on Sunday. The Bengals are officially, as far as I'm aware, out of playoff contention, but Nick, Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday of the year. I did my Thanksgiving actually 2 weeks ago, Nick. I do it around my football schedule. So that way I do it on a Saturday. So me and my coaches, I basically invite all of my assistant coaches over. It's my thank you for volunteering their time to coach, be volunteers in American football. So I do it on a weekend where we don't have a game on Sunday, so we can be as hungover as we need to be. So I actually ended up cooking a Mexican feast on Thanksgiving Day. Not traditional, but still delicious nonetheless, Nick.
Mexican on Thanksgiving. That is a new one for me. What was on the menu for a Mexican Thanksgiving feast? Was there any turkey involved?
No, but I will tell you about my Thanksgiving turkey. But no, for my Mexican Thanksgiving Day, I did birria tacos. Anyone that is on TikTok or Instagram, you've probably been served a reel of this very juicy quesadilla-like taco. It's just slow-cooked spicy beef, Nick, covered with a bunch of cheese. It takes hours to do, but it's just lovely. It's all worth it. Yeah, like I said, go to TikTok, go to your Instagram reels. It'll probably be one of the first recipes. Seemingly every food truck now wants to sell them.
Yeah, I haven't eaten actually from a food truck in a long time. Definitely not since I've moved over here. The only thing close to a food truck here is a Rastafarian guy standing in front of a 40-gallon drum that's cut out where he's cooking some chicken, which isn't my go-to shopping experience for my lunch at the moment. But anyway, it's good to have you back on the show as well, Chris. When I think about welcoming back someone, I have the sound of the song to Welcome Back Kotter. Have you ever watched Welcome Back Kotter? Go look up Welcome Back Kotter. It's an American show. It is like one of the first shows that John Travolta got famous for. He was had a bit of a cool Fonz-like kind of character. He had a saying he used to say, "Up your nose with a rubber hose" was his, one of his lines. I think he was supposed to be a high school student, but it was obviously not that. But that show is like 60s or something. But it was on TV in Australia. It got to Australia like 20 years later. And I always had that song playing in my head when I welcoming anyone back. So it's good to have you on. Anyway, again, after obviously a few weeks off, I was trying to keep the hosting role going. I did my best, but definitely it feels much more uncomfortable. So full credit to you when you are steering the ship for us. On the Thanksgiving side, it was actually interesting over here in Jamaica. I've only got a few weeks left, obviously, until we actually move across to Sweden shortly, which will be a fun endeavor for us. But here you get a real mismatch, and some people do celebrate it, some people do not. It goes by the radar. We actually went to a small hotel on the other side of the island in a place called Negril, which I look it up if you want to look up Negril sunsets. And shout out to Will Tubbs, who pushed me to go to, well, he didn't push me. He recommended multiple times, I should say. I don't want to put negative tone on it. To Rick's Cafe. Go on Google and check out Rick's Cafe sunsets, and it is a glorious, glorious place to sit and experience. Chilling out, watching the sunset, and drinking some beers and margaritas, etc. It's quite a tourist spot, but it's so hard to get to. It's actually not too touristy at the same time. It's a really good, a beautiful place to go. I saw one crazy guy jumping in off 20 meters down the cliff face, which was one of the most frightening things that I've seen, because there was such a sheer cliff face that I really thought he was going to hit the side. But that's what they do. They go around, collect some tips, and they jump 20 meters down. And it's an easy, good way to make a living for some if you got that sort of talent. But had a good experience nonetheless over the Thanksgiving break, because our school was shut because our kids going to an American school over here.
I'm not surprised by the slightest to hear that Will Tubbs had a random Jamaican recommendation of where to go. That's just the kind of person, the global head of content here, or global head of program, I believe is the official title. Tubbs is just a man of many talents. You never know where he might pop up with a recommendation or a contact, but he's an endless list. His black book is incredible. But Nick, this year for Thanksgiving, I did something new. In addition to doing the traditional menu of everything else, I actually also borrowed my neighbor's smoker, and I smoked some turkey legs like you get like at a carnival or a festival, these big sort of dinosaur turkey-sized legs, just as a way to, kind of always keep myself on my toes, pushing myself as a culinary wannabe expert. And it was good, Nick. Like, it balanced out quite nicely. It brought a nice little extra flavor. Everyone enjoyed it. And I would recommend for anyone that's never smoked a turkey next Thanksgiving, have a think about it. It was definitely worthwhile.
The thing I've got to look forward to, and I've realised we're now at nearly 6 minutes talking about turkeys, sunsets, and nothing to do with sports, but part of the fun is Kreftschiever, which is basically crayfish parties, and you cook crayfish and eat them, and they taste like salt water, taste like the sea, which is not bad. It's very messy, but something to look forward to. So that's probably the Swedish version of, I guess, sort of a Swedish version of Thanksgiving. That I've got something to look forward to for next year. So you can smoke some turkeys, and I'll boil some crayfish, and we can meet somewhere in the middle and have quite a party.
Yeah, I mean, they do stuff like that in New Orleans. They do the big boils and all that. Just probably, I'd imagine the Creoles have a slightly different spice palette than maybe the Scandinavian region does, would be my guess.
Definitely.
So now, Nick, just because it's Thanksgiving doesn't mean there weren't football and sports and all those different things. And, at some point we will talk maybe a little bit more about Amazon specifically with, Black Friday football and things like that. But it does sort of tie in a little bit to advertising and e-commerce and things like that. And today's focus on the podcast, we are going to be talking specifically about advertising. And, everyone else who's been listening to the podcast will be aware Sports Pro Madrid was only just a couple weeks ago, but advertising seemingly is continuing to grow. We spend quite a bit of time talking about subscriptions. Back in the day, that was the golden ticket, right? How many subscribers can you get to the platform? And seemingly, we're seeing platforms like Amazon, platforms like Netflix, introducing more and more advertising into their businesses. YouTube is obviously growing using advertising. And there were a number of sessions with people talking about advertising. It includes Mike Rich, who's the head of, I believe, partnerships and advertising for Warner Brothers Discovery, doing a little bit of a case study on what they did with the Olympics. We had a number of panels that included the likes of DAZN, Dine Media, the European Broadcast Union, EA Sports, all kind of talking about the growing role that advertising is having. So, there's a few different ways to splice it up, Nick, but just on the ground, what were you sort of hearing about people when it came from the growth of advertising in sports specifically?
Yeah, it's been a while taken us a long time to get here, I would say, but the reluctant acceptance that scale is the play here for sports, and therefore the scale enables other monetization channels other than subscription, and those being digital sponsorship, advertising, and maybe some e-commerce. But really the main enabler is advertising out of all those three at the moment. And that was the hot topic on absolutely everyone's list, is how do you make the most of getting reach across all these different platforms that now everyone has available to them? And how do you get the maximum value out of the potential advertising inventory that you may have? Because you think about sports creates and has so much inventory available to it. And look what the Americans are able to do with things like the NFL is the big example I often use, is many of the major NFL rights are broadcast on free to air because they're able to bring such incredible value and generate extra value out of the advertising inventory they have. And it generates enough revenue to fund and make it worthwhile to take that approach versus just leaning on a subscription approach. So I think sports as a collective, the European market's finally getting there, which is quite exciting, although maybe something we'll cover in the future, as I did another session on building platforms and they were only talking about subscription there. But there's some people still got some work to do to get to that place. But the opportunity about what advertising can bring, how do you actually execute it? And how do you generate the most revenue, the cost per thousand, whatever engagement metrics you need to just get the most value out of your rights, is what everyone was talking about. And one of our main partners for the event, and I think one of the most interesting businesses in the industry, is Transmit, who we've actually had on the podcast a while ago talking about the advertising opportunity, probably at the earlier stages of where we started to hear a lot of buzz across the industry about it. But they are one of the ones that are absolutely leading this inertia for sports, broadcasters, and platforms alike to create assets and new inventory to maximize the value of that live sports and that appointment viewing that it can bring. And they're putting the controls and the power into anyone's hands, whether they are the big, massive streaming platforms and broadcasters, your Paramounts, your DAZNs, those types, or even the ones underneath that. There might be a sports property who's just looking to maximize the value of their live sports and maybe want to, whether it's as a starting point, use it for some of their sponsor partners for the series or the league or the federation, depending on who it is, and build something from there. So we definitely wanted to make sure we talked about and prioritized it in this conversation, because advertising and indeed what Transmit are doing and just what everyone is discussing as a whole in the industry is maximizing the value of what advertising can bring. And even just as recently as yesterday, we saw that the Club World Cup, I said COP, which is actually how you say it in Swedish. Instantly, it's COP. But they've just gone to DAZN, and that will be free to watch on the DAZN platform. And there's no way they're not going to be leaning into every possible way of maximizing the advertising revenue they can around that event to make and justify the returns on that. So everyone's looking to advertising as a new revenue stream. Everyone's accepting that needs to be the case. There's a few more things I want to talk about there, but yeah, it is definitely the hottest topic right now. And we're finally really leaning into advertising, and some are looking at advertising first, not just advertising as a incremental secondary revenue stream. So everyone has to be paying way more attention to this.
I'll come back to the tech side and some of what Transmit do, but you mentioned two big organizations there, and there's actually kind of a disconnect between the two. You mentioned the NFL is the one that everybody looks to, right? Because they make so much money because it's based on advertising. The issue from a European perspective, and we start talking about football, and you talk about the Club World Cup being on DAZN, but you could also extend that out to the Premier League or La Liga, Bundesliga, name whoever. They don't necessarily have that built-in stop-go nature where advertisements can just be plugged in there. So is that a matter of a lack of willingness from fans to tolerate, breaks? Even if you had this, what do they call it, the box in, where like it's just in the small corner, things like that. Is it legal? Is it technological? It's easy to look at the NFL and be like, that's what we want to do. But from a European perspective, there's probably still some question marks as to fan willingness, how you do it, and all those other different bits.
I'm so glad you asked me that question, Chris. And we weren't even prepared for that, but I've looked into this a little bit, and I'm trying to make sure that I can articulate this the right way. The business around advertising in live broadcast, let's just focus on soccer and football at the moment, because they go in hand and looking at it through the lens of European leagues. There are actual regulations in place that prohibit that type of advertising on screen that you've just talked about. Companies like Transmit enable the ability to do that and do it well. So creating inventory that, again, the controls are in the hands of whoever is the owner of the platform, and they can be doing that live or whatever it might be, or setting everything in place prior to that. So you can add all those different ways of layering it in, whether it's going dual screen and having something run on the side, which I've seen with golf and a bunch of other sports. The NFL does it all the time. The NBA does it constantly. Or just having graphics in the corner of the screen and running ads, taking up 10, 15% of the real estate on the screen, all that stuff. Companies like Transmit do that and do it really well. Now, the problem is in football, the regulations state you can't have overlay advertising in the broadcast. UEFA has regulations on it, and FIFA have regulations on it. And that's why the perimeter board advertising business is so lucrative, is such a big business. It's kind of a little bit behind the scenes. You don't hear it talked about a lot, but there is a lot of money being spent on that. And actually, if you watch a European game these days, have you noticed what some of they do, where there's like two boards back to back and some or side by side, and they are sometimes actually broadcasting one massive image versus two separate ones running at the same time. So that's become quite a big business, but the approach is quite old school, right? Old school sales teams. It's not like a big marketplace for that stuff. Some of the rights of those do vary between league to league on who owns the ability to sell those. Typically it's the club, I believe in a lot of instances, but not for the major competitions, which are held by FIFA and alike. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that is the case. So if I'm wrong, please get in touch with me and I'll correct myself in the future. So that's because that's become so lucrative, because that real estate's so valuable. The opportunity for the advertising on screen hasn't been as prioritized, let's say. But the future is now, and I believe that you have to look at flipping the script on that. Really just going, UEFA and FIFA have to upend, in my view, the regulations that are in place, lean into the role advertising can play on that, and you will see the media rights values go up dramatically. The tricky bit will be managing how they turn off the taps on the perimeter board, or not. They don't have to turn the taps off. Sorry, they have to change the business model, because that means that those perimeter boards inherently will lose some value, because there'll be other advertising real estate being used at the same time. And how much that is up for question. And obviously they could do start very, very softly, very slowly, and then build from there. But that might be one of the question marks and considerations why they haven't done it yet.
Well, here's my question now, because we've gone down a rabbit hole that we might not be prepared for. I think, so let's say you mentioned UEFA or the Premier League. Does that mean NBC Peacock couldn't do that if they are in the US? You get my question, as in is that only for broadcasts within the jurisdiction? Or let's put it this way, Nick, I'm going home for Christmas this year, and I will certainly be watching games on NBC Peacock. So I'll be able to confirm in 2-3 weeks whether or not that they do that. But to the point around the rule and stuff like that, it is interesting to think. But to your point, one of the other things interesting about the display boards, I know they now have the technology, Nick, where those display boards don't necessarily always show the same thing, where they've got the technology now. If it's, say you're in the APAC market, it'll show an APAC based brand, where if you're in the US, it'll show a US based brand. I know there's some degree of customization with those boards now, to even to your point, just to create more inventory, where you can almost have a global advertisement, or you could sell it on a more local level, depending on whatever the broadcaster is, or wherever that market's going to, which is also how I know you can find out if people are pirating streams, because if their sideline boards are completely different languages, it's usually a giveaway that it's a pirated stream.
Yeah, absolutely. There's companies like Sapona that, and who are they called? Sponsor Tech. I think they're called Sponsix Tech. Forgive me if I've butchered the name there, but they are two of the companies that do a great job at the geo advertising marketing on those boards. So how you've described is pretty good. Basically it's like geo advertising, but on the perimeter board. So if you change feed, you'll get served a different set of ads depending on what country you are, and that's what you can see when you. Why am I getting an ad in Chinese? It's because the feed's probably pirated. Because but it's a great way of marketing things in the same way that traditional display advertising is sold and geo managed through traditional websites and the like. You can do that through these perimeter board businesses. But that took so long to get up and running. I remember when one of the first years at Sports Pro that I started 15 plus years, nearly 15 years ago now. Bloody hell, that's a long time. 15 years ago. And I saw Sapona, like, that is genius, that tech. But it took them years and years to get it going. So it's like the tech was there way before the regulation allowed it to come to fruition, and for it to be adopted, and all the challenges you have with bringing something like this to life. But now that they have, it's a pretty really solid product, and I think it's been implemented in a lot of markets. But to the US specifically, I can't say for sure. My guess is it is competition regulation that is preventing that. So therefore, the pitch side advertising is still an important revenue driver, but I am not sure if the NBC and the like have, because they're outside of, say, Europe, they're able to do more. I don't believe they are, but I can't say that for sure.
Like I said, I'll confirm, and as soon as we're back from the New Year's, when I get back. The other side of that, Nick, you talk about just like the amount of time it took to get here. And my first ever job out of university was at a media agency buying. So like, I walked into the world, and like the term programmatic was just, to me, was something that was just always established. Like the idea, oh yeah, we're just gonna do all of our buying by programmatic. And then the session that we're gonna run the interview on later, they're talking to DAZN about programmatic buying, and it almost came across as like, oh, have you heard about programmatic buying? Are you doing it? And there's a part of me that's like, shit, I had that job, 7-8 years ago. And to your point, how much of this is necessarily there is something special about sports where the tech has not been up to speed, versus how much of it is a lack of a willingness or knowledge of advertising that's not gone through? Because some of the things I hear are terms that I was hearing back in my previous role in different industries.
It's a really good question, and I think the complexity of it is, it's not complex, and it is. I think the not complex part is programmatic's value is that you can ensure all your inventory is being used, right? That's the big value. If someone like who runs a media company like I do, I can make sure if I want to lean into programmatic, that I can make sure every asset on our website is driving revenue through the display advertising we have on our websites. But what has happened over the years, everyone kind of knows what it has been. It's a race to the bottom. You've seen every media company add more inventory. And that's why you saw people like The Athletic pop up at the time and say, hey, you're not going to have to get bombarded with advertising. Come to us and we'll build this beautiful safe haven of subscription content, high quality, that you won't have to worry about all those ads and pop-ups and everything. And the reason they were doing that is for the monetization bit. But what was happening in the programmatic space is it was a race to the bottom. So more and more people were offering inventory, advertisers paying less because they're not really getting the value probably from it they wanted, because the real estate was so messy. If you go to some of those news websites even now, and there might be like 30 ads and 40 ads, and you're just like, what? You're clicking your way through trying to make it to the article or to the content itself. And so basically that problem is the problem with programmatic is it's caused a fundamental bottoming out of the value of those ads. But with sports, because it's still appointment viewing, you'll hear most major execs talk about the value of live is still super valuable. The intention that it brings is unrivaled compared to almost any other piece of content available out there, is that it's really highly valued. But through programmatic, it's not been able to bring those CPMs to life in the same way. So that's why you're seeing in advertising and sponsorship be still a powerful tool to bring that to life. So most sports properties, platforms, and even the major broadcasters actually sell advertising themselves. They sell it because they are selling the story, selling the vision, painting the picture of the value of being in front of these audiences using data. It's not just to sell, but they're using the right sort of data points to really ensure that the prospective advertisers, the media buyers in some instance, really value that inventory and asset, and are not just seeing it in your Excel spreadsheet at the end of the campaign going, did that deliver results for us? Because programmatic and advertising like that, programmatic is typically measured on cost per clicks and things like that. But in those sorts of experiences, it's about awareness, it's about reach, it's about engagement, all those other factors. You're building out the marketing and advertising funnel. And that's why you can't just measure it the same way as a traditional programmatic play.
And then just further on from a tech perspective, there's other things you hear about, dynamic ad insertion. And then you mentioned there briefly, the use of data, being able to be as hyper relevant as possible, right? That's the reason everybody wants first party data, so that you can, serve the stuff that's actually relevant as opposed to just giving ads to the wrong individual, or even just being more innovative. We are so used to, I think, seeing advertisements more often than not. Like, we don't even see them. Like, they might be in our face, but we don't see them. It's, what is taking place from a tech side to, serve people the right content at the right times and in a format and a manner which actually drives conversions or whatever your objectives are for doing the advertisements.
Well, the dynamic ad insertion piece is important because it enables the basically a set it, forget it sort of approach, where it could be YouTube is a great example of having that type of access. We talk about programmatic. YouTube obviously does bring in revenue from an advertising perspective, but it is much lower. That's where the scale piece is so important. The technology is adding so much value. Again, I keep banging on it, but just honestly, if you are listening and you are interested in this, have a look at the Transmit guys, because they do all that stuff. It's one thing to do it in a platform that's like a YouTube, where they do have those sorts of capabilities. But if you are controlling the feed yourself, then you need the tools for that. I'm sure there's others other than Transmit that do that sort of thing, but their stuff is really impressive. So you can control all those things. You want to have dynamic ads inserted, you set it up and you can forget it. You don't have to be controlling the advertising the whole way through. But it just gives you the flexibility to think about how you want some of that content dropped into the feed or into the live experience that isn't going to upset consumers. So we've talked about the football problem. Obviously, the other sports have more opportunity there because they are perhaps more stop-starty. So they all need to be looking at this. They all need to be looking at advertising much more closely and absolutely leaning in. The tricky bit for everyone is going to be how you sell it, and then the technology is there. So it's getting people to accept it, getting people to buy it, and then just selling it at the right sort of value levels to make it all worthwhile for everyone. So yes, I'm saying I'm waxing lyrical about it as the future area that's all sports needs to focus on, but there's still that adoption piece that just takes a long time to get the marketplace. You worked in the media buyer, like a media agency, to come to a media agency, hey, we've got a new set of inventory that is measured differently and served differently. That's actually really tricky, right? For a media agency to be able to go, all right, we're going to plug that alongside everything else we do without way more context and ability to bring the measure alongside the other stuff you're doing, unless I'm wrong. So that's a big challenge there that they've still got to overcome, but it'll get there. But I'm just not sure how quick.
Yeah. Well, so the interview we're going to hand over, like I said, came from Sports Pro Madrid, and it does have the co-founder at Transmit, so you get to hear more about them in terms of what they're doing from a technology perspective, but they were also alongside EA Sports and DAZN. So it was a really kind of interesting conversation in the sense of, we know DAZN started off as a subscription-based business who have had to diversify, who are now going to be bringing more advertising into what they do. And we've actually got the SVP of ad media sales in Spain and Portugal, market that they do have a number of tier one rights in, or things like the Premier League that maybe aren't as big as La Liga in Spain, but certainly are not rights to be looked down upon. And then EA Sports obviously is a very interesting company doing all sorts of stuff from microtransactions, but they're also very much a big time sponsor in the world of sports as an endemic brand. They mentioned that they're the official sponsors of La Liga, and for them, advertising in the game, out of the game are all elements that are very important to them as a business. So it is a really interesting conversation. And then it's actually even moderated by Alan Fagan, who's I'm not even sure if he's officially started his role yet, but is going to be the new managing director at the European Broadcast Union, who we've gone to speak to them before. So yeah, really interesting
for Eurovision Sport. So that's the OTT platform they've launched. I spoke to Glenn Kalani a while back on that, and that's basically he's taking over that responsibility. He's got an advertising background, so he talks. He's a really good person to have leading that conversation, even before he took that role.
Yeah. So, like I said, it's a really interesting conversation. It kind of touches on all those different things. So, Nick, I don't know if there's anything else that you particularly want to raise before we hand that over, but if you do want to go into the advertising conversation, all three of these individuals, if you include Alan, are all very well versed in this. And Nick's point, reach out to the guys at Transmit if you want. I also know Alan, at least in particular of that panel, is very happy to speak. He's very active on LinkedIn as well. Sort of, what do they say? Lyrical waxing lyrically.
Waxing lyrical,
waxing lyrical about the future of advertisement. So for those two particular topics, both Scott Young and Alan Fagan would definitely be people you can easily reach out to on LinkedIn.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot to take from this. I mean, we've obviously covered it from our view, but they're the experts. Listen, I'd say definitely it's definitely worth a good listen for the next 30 minutes and take in a lot more about how all this business really works.
Well, we appreciate you guys, and we will catch you next week. But definitely, as Nick said, stay along for the next half hour to hear that interview.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and many thanks for coming to this session. My name is Alan Fagan. I've spent most of my career in advertising roles. I'm delighted to be here today because I think it's a very good time to talk about advertising in sports media. I recently took a new position. I am responsible for the new streaming platform, Eurovision Sport, part of the EBU. And it's a streaming platform that has advertising at the very heart of the business model. But part of the reason I'm so keen that we have this conversation is something's going on within advertising in sports media at the moment. It's become one of the most desirable ways to connect with consumers from a brand perspective. In terms of advertising spend, it's currently around about 80 billion, which is about 8% of total global spend. But that number's projected to grow to somewhere between 120 and 130 billion by the end of the decade. So that's really phenomenal growth. So this panel is going to discuss some of the reasons why that may be the case, and also to discuss some of the innovations that are happening that will ensure that sports media remains one of the most effective ways for brands to engage with fans. So I'm just going to hand over, let you guys do a quick introduction. So Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I'm honored to be leading the advertising team for DAZN in Spain and Portugal since 4 months ago. But I come from the tech, digital advertising and entertainment industry. And for me, what it's exciting is that I get to be able and make available for brands all the 360 degrees experience that we're doing for fans, for sports fans, now available for brands, because it's not only about targeting the right audience in the right time as they were speaking, but it's also how we can help brands be part of the conversation, have a more proactive role.
Perfect. We'll definitely get into that later. Scott?
I'm Scott Young, co-founder and Chief Product Officer of Transmit, and we're excited to talk about how we kind of sit in the intersection between sports streamers and brands and how we're able to enable new innovative ad experiences inside of a stream, primarily to deliver better results in ROI for the streamers themselves, and to deliver more creative, high-impact ad opportunities for brands in the sports sector.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Great to be here today. James Salmon. So I'm Senior Marketing Director on the artist formerly known as EA Sports FIFA, now EA Sports FC. We're on a mission to inspire the world to love football. I think the worlds of football fandom across passive, active, and interactive are ever blurring. And I think advertising has a key role to play in continuing that journey to grow our platform.
So I hope you agree, but I'm really pleased with the way that this panel has come together. I think we've got quite diverse views from a related part of the industry, but we've got 3 individuals who they are all collectively shaping the future of sports media. So I think a very good panel to have today. Okay, first question. I started by talking about some really impressive forecasts for the growth of advertising in sports media. And a very simple question to you all: why do you think sports media is so well placed to take an increasing share of total global advertising spend? And Scott?
Yeah, I'll break the ice there. So I think if you just look at what brands really like, what they want out of their ad spend is attention. Obviously, sports is the greatest sector that delivers that attention because it has the most engaged fan base. So the challenge becomes, from our perspective, that brands just want more of it, and they want to make more of a meaningful impact within that content. So when it comes to us looking at the landscape and seeing how a lot of viewership is leading towards the transition to streaming over the internet, streaming over IP, then that lends itself to having really interesting opportunity to adopt advanced advertising technologies. And what we've seen to date is that even acts as a further accelerant to create and encourage new and increased ad spend into the space.
Yeah, I'd add to that. I think there's a number of unique factors that come into the sports industry. The first is appointment to view. It's one of the few remaining bastions of that. The second is the emotional connection. I'm, for my sins at times, a Portsmouth FC fan, and tuning in and watching them, there's a deep emotional connection there, whether I'm based in the UK or elsewhere. And the last is the evolution of technology. I think technology has such an enormous role to play in the advancement of the experience. And actually, I think there's so many unique opportunities where you can connect bespoke advertising to fans consuming sports content and it actually be additive to the experience, not detractive.
100% agree with both of you. I would add from 3 different pillars. The first one is the base of what sports brings to the table, which is passion, values, and community. And that's huge. As you were saying, it's very difficult, very hard to get that. The second is fragmented audiences. We are speaking about the economy of attention. How do I get this attention? And I think like with these premium audiences who are very loyal, who are very diverse, that you can get in global and scale, it's in real time because it's live and you can generate that live interactions. And then it's a premium environment, which is brand safe, and you can get that high attention and that high engagement. that's amazing for getting that targeted audience, your attention. But if you add the third pillar, which is cultural relevance, what do we do after we watch a game or we, or there is the final or something has happened? You go to the office, you go to your family, you go to your friends. It has cultural relevance. And in that part of the cultural relevance, we have what it's called the storytelling. Mm-hmm. That's what brands are also looking. It's not that they only recognize my brand, it's that they speak about my brand. And if we think about it, it's about the storytelling of players, of the game, of the coach, of, all that magic that's happening around. And that's why it's so meaningful.
And that is a brilliant answer. So look, I'm going to pick up on one thing that I think you all touched on, either directly or indirectly, which is that deep engagement that fans have with their clubs, with the communities, with the content that they are consuming. And I'm going to kind of change the conversation slightly to talk about some of the ways that you guys are creating those deeper connections for brands or as a brand with your media partners. And actually, James, I'm going to come to you first. So to start, I'm really interested in how a brand such as EA Sports activates their sports sponsorships, but also their media partnerships. We've worked together in the past, and it was a horrible experience. It wasn't. It was a very good experience.
It was great, Alan. Come on.
But if you could just talk a little bit about how are you activating that with a view from and how are you using sports media to create those deeper connections?
Yeah, absolutely, Alan. So let me start by stating the blinding obvious. Sports fandom has evolved. And I think, we have a unique opportunity to play a role in that. I spoke briefly about the journey that we've been on evolving from EA Sports FIFA to EA Sports FC. And we set about with a really lofty aspiration of going from having 150 million players to growing to being a football platform with 1 billion fans. Now, the only way you're going to accomplish that is through speaking to connect to Sarah's earlier point with fans in a native way that's connected to storytelling in the real world of the sport. So working with DAZN, by way of example, really fitting given the panel today, with our work with UEFA Women's Champions League and being able to serve ads that are connected to our in-game experience where you can play. Another example I'd use being here in Madrid is with La Liga and the evolution they've been on as they've evolved their brands and the integration of broadcast overlays and the way we've partnered with them as their title sponsor. The last thing I call out is the importance of timeliness. And we've had many opportunities where we've been able to blur the lines between the digital world of sport and the real world of sport. And one example I'd cite is Finalissima, where partnering with UEFA and CONMEBOL, we were the player of the match sponsor. And within 5 minutes of the final whistle, Lionel Messi receiving his player of the match item, that also going into the game, and that ability to back that with advertising spend and reach a broader audience. So that connectivity between our interactive platform and passively consumed content through broadcast or OTT, I think is really, really clear to me in growing that deeper connection with fans.
Very good. And just to go back to something I said earlier, I mean, we have worked together. It was a very good experience.
It was great.
But it wasn't an off-the-shelf experience. It wasn't I'm trying to push you something and just take that and we'll negotiate on the price. It was, what can you create for me that is right for your audience, but is also right for the brand? And the question coming off of that, and hopefully there will be some other media owners in the audience. I mean, what does good look like? What are you looking for from your media partners?
I mean, Alan, you've hit it. Like, it has to be tailored. I think this is a bugbear of mine, a frustration. I think just the very standardized approach to media propositions for brands. I think there was a time and a place for that, but I think that's gone. I think technology is too evolved. I think there are too many opportunities through working with partners such as the one I'm sat on stage with right now, where you can actually be additive to the fan experience. So that tailoring is such an important point. Speak to the brand, understand what it is that they're looking for, and tailor the experience to ultimately add value for the fan experience.
So I'm really interested in the data side and data sharing, but we'll get into that. We'll get into that in a minute. And I'm going to come to you next. But one thing I've got to say at the beginning, but I think everyone knows, we do really want to hear from you. So please do submit your questions, and hopefully we will have time. We'll make time to get to those at the end. So Sarah, DAZN have been leading and continue to have a leadership position in changing the way that many fans are consuming live sport. So if you could just talk a little bit about your platform, your platforms, and how that is enabling brands to have those deeper connections through advertising and sponsorship.
So as you say, we are redefining how we are approaching the sports fans and the experience that they have with us. It's true that we have this unique and truly global sports entertainment platform that we can count on. And as I was saying before, it's a premium audience, it's high value audiences because it's sports. But not only that, not only brands can tap into that, can tap into the attention that we mentioned and building those deeper connections. And the way we do it, if we think about it, it's in three ways. The first one, it's the rights and the content, the premium content that we have. The second one, it's the talent. And we think about the talent, it's the players, when we interview them, journalists, like creators. When we were speaking and you tackle it, it's like how we can make this custom, how we can be part of the conversation, how we can do that live interaction and that live engagement. I think about not only branded content, social series, originals. We can create anything around the brand values and also what the sports fans are looking for in terms of the conversation. And the third one, it's the scale, the large scale, but something that you mentioned as well is technology. How we can use data, how we can use insights in order to target that audience, personalized experience, and also facilitate the buy-in with programmatic buy-in so that you can get to that large scale through the globe in a very easy and efficient way.
Programmatic, a big part of your business?
We are working on that.
All right, and a kind of follow-up question. I'm very interested in your investment into women's sport and women's football in particular, and your decision to put a significant volume of live in front of the paywall. So can you just speak a little bit about that, the importance of advertising and sponsorship, and a kind of second part to that, just how much interest have you seen from brands and advertisers for that?
Regarding freemium and women's sports, let me start with the freemium just to step back. There are four main pillars of why we launched freemium. The first one is the customer experience, being able to offer fan sports from end to end, so that you also have this freemium part. The second one, it's DAZN as a brand. Also, what we want to push is for discoverability. So from brand awareness to customer acquisition to also loyalty retention. So we use it from that point of view. Then the third one, you mentioned it, advertising. It's increasing the audience that we can get, and that we can help brands to target and speak with. And the fourth, it's our commitment to women's sports. Since some years, and this year, for instance, we had the Women UEFA Champions League in freemium. We announced it yesterday that we are going to have also on freemium the rights for the European Basketball Women's League. So that's our commitment to women's sports. And by putting it into freemium, what we are working is on the awareness, on authority, on really allowing this content to get to the wider audience and supporting. And actually, we have a beautiful example that we did with Visa. And it was also custom, as you were saying, as a brand, like you want things custom to you. Visa is also sponsor of the Women's UEFA Champions League. And they came to us because they wanted to tackle the online hate, provide a safe environment to speak about women's soccer. They wanted to send positive messages. And what we did, for the ones that you're still not DAZN subscribers and members in freemium, we have the fan zone, which is a chat. a live interactive chat that while you're watching the ride, you can share. You were saying, and I think also in the previous panel, they were saying how important is this live interaction, even that it's not bothering, but it's actually engaging with the rest of the community. So we did the Visa fan zone for the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. And the way we did it was community-centric. What we also did is trying to get the community and the fans to share pep talks. So in real time, support with nice messages about their favorite player, the favorite team, etc. And then the third part was the interaction with quizzes and polls, and the winners actually got VIP tickets for the final in Bilbao. And what we were able to deliver for Visa, beyond obviously the insights and the targeted message and all the interaction, it was this very purpose-led, fan-centric, interaction engagement that it was in 170 countries, 7 different languages, more than 40 million views, 200 million impressions, and here's the best part, more than 1 million interactions between the fans, 69,000 positive messages towards players and team, and the moderator only had to participate 0.1% during the 13 games. So it's how you deliver those KPIs, and you're not only like doing that awareness, you're not doing that only that engagement, you're actually being an agent of change in the game.
Yeah, very cool. Very, very impressive numbers, which kind of makes the lead on irrelevant, but I'll ask it anyway because I'm really interested here. So I used to work for ESPN. We went quite early. This is ESPN in EMEA. We went quite early into covering women's sport in a significant way on our digital platforms. And the money just wasn't there from an advertising perspective. Have you seen that change significantly?
I think more and more brands want to make a difference. Because you can either choose to be a logo, which is fine, but in general, beyond obviously having a purpose with the brand, I always say that if you're putting the logo, I mean, James might be able to speak better to this, but how can I amplify this? How can I be part of the conversation? How I can become as a brand also a fan, that it's like I'm sitting as a brand next to the other fans. And I think more and more, if you want to be relevant in the attention economy that Scott was mentioning, you have to have a purpose, like what difference you're making. And I think more and more brands have that top of mind, or if I'm going into a sport, or if I'm going to support a team, what can I do?
I just add to that as well, Sarah, because I couldn't agree more. Like, it's completely spot on. And I think there is, the purpose is a big part of it. I also think it's a recognition that the value is reciprocal, because of course there's investment. Visa have put forward investment, no doubt, in executing what you just spoke through, as have we in putting players into our experience. But we're drawing immense value back from women's football in our game as well. There have been over 4.2 billion matches played with a female athlete in Football Ultimate Team. That's huge value for us. So as much as we're investing in the sport through advertising with yourselves or through our relationships with licensors, we're also benefiting hugely from the growth of fandom in our experience.
Very cool. Very cool. Scott, so Transmit are at the forefront of innovation in advertising on streaming. Can you just talk a little bit about, what does that mean? What new products have you created? And I think if it's not too tough a question in particular, how is that leading to greater ROI for brands and for media owners and rights holders?
Yeah, so for us, it starts with the rights holders and media owners, and we work with them with a goal of enhancing the return on their media rights investment through ad-supported streaming. That's what our product does, and it coordinates that whole experience for them. But we strive to do that in a way that protects the viewer experience, and in some cases even enhances it. And I just wanted to touch on one thing that was mentioned where you guys were talking about brands don't want something that's off the shelf. They want something outside the box, so to speak. How we had to solve that problem, because we are obviously creating new incremental ad opportunities that are kind of new viewer experiences, but we also have to do that in a way that that can be customized if you want it, but it doesn't have to be overly customized, and it could be scalable to appear to a wide variety of demand sources. So you could use it to customize your sponsorship tier. You could use it for better and more engaging programmatic advertising executions, and it could respond to all of that to really maximize the scale of the return on investment, and that appeals to both advertisers, obviously, and really impactful for media rights owners of all sizes that have all sorts of different types of audience and types of content, whether it's live, VOD, and how they use it. And I'll talk about some of the trends of how they use it. Is they'll use our software to create incremental ad opportunities during contextual or key moments within a sporting event, such as we've seen them use it to create new ad opportunities, trigger an ad inventory opportunities during a home run or a goal score or a penalty or an icing. Whenever there's a lull in action, that could turn into a monetizable event in stream, on screen, directly targeted to viewers. And everything can be personalized, that individual viewer experience, because we're leveraging the power of server-side ad insertion and digital ad targeting. And how we've seen them at advertisers using it is we've even seen them adopting messaging that's specific to appealing to a type of fan in a particular moment. So if we know that this is a fan of a certain team and a goal was just scored on their team, advertisers have adapted their messaging to appeal to that fan, console them, and say, okay, sorry you got a goal score on you, but we're going to elevate your spirits with this new offering, see a special code. So things like that can be scalable and really customized down to the individual viewer, individual fan, to maximize your impact. And all sorts of viewers watching concurrently could see different ads simultaneously.
I've been in advertising all my days. I'm a big fan of advertising, and it can be additive. It need not take away from the viewer experience. But I think there's probably some people in the audience that are like, I don't want ads during live. That's intrusive. I don't want that. Can you talk about some of the ways that can be delivered without being too intrusive, or some of those new?
Yeah. So the types of ad formats. We're really we're powering the canvas, and we're kind of like the operating system that's coordinating the whole experience and making sure that the right message gets the right viewer on screen. Understanding that ads can be intrusive, there's a variety of different creative ways you can do this in terms of non-intrusive squeezebacks. You're not taking over the audio of the stream, or maybe you are taking over the audio of the stream, but it's complementary to what the viewer's watching. So you can get really creative with this new technology, and you can really speak to each individual viewer while they're watching, or maybe even we've seen sports betting operators even offering up new insights about a play that they just saw or what's happening on stream. So you're not just interrupting a viewer and saying, buy what I'm trying to sell you. You're entertaining them while they're watching, and that's how you really get the biggest impact and the greatest return out of the fan base.
Very cool. Very cool. Right, they said this would go quickly. It has gone very quickly. We still have plenty of time, but I'm going to move us on a little bit. I mentioned earlier that I wanted to get into the importance of data in advertising. We hear a lot about zero, first, second, third-party data, and how it's really important for anyone that's looking for an advertising strategy to understand their audience. So can you just talk to me a little bit, maybe start with the brand perspective on how you're using data, why it's so important?
Yeah, absolutely, Alan. I would start by just reiterating what I said at the top, which is fans' expectations have evolved. So personalization has come from being a competitive advantage to being, I would argue, an expectation. I also think when I look at our space specifically, the way in which fans interact has evolved as well. So I mentioned this at the top: active, passive, and interactive fandom. I'll start with passive fandom, so watching a game, going to a football stadium, watching an OTT platform, etc., etc. Interactive fandom, which has for the longest time been what EA Sports FC has been connected to. And then lastly, active football playing, getting out there and playing the real world of the sport. Those lines are blurred. Yep. Like the modern football fan is all of the above. And our research suggests that the majority of our fans are playing more sport in the real world through their connection with our video game, which actually is at odds with the misconception that gaming is detractive from the real world of the sport. So I say this all through the lens of data and personalization, because I would argue in the past there has been a feeling or a view that actually gaming is drawing back from your worlds or the active world of the sport, whereas actually I would argue that it is adjacent and complementary. And the more that we're able to, through data, personalize a message, seamlessly connect and signpost these worlds, the better the experience is going to be for fans.
Yeah, so we look at data and personalization as perfecting the experience for fans as well, and we look at it in three areas. Being a software company, one, how do we use data to inform the content and the message of what gets delivered inside of an advertisement, and how can that be updated dynamically based on what the viewer is watching and automatically alter that message? Two, when should ads be triggered? We use contextual data and contextual cues to get better and train our algorithms into understanding when the optimal moment to actually trigger an ad would be inside of the content stream, outside of the traditional ad break. And then three, use data and personalization from a measurement perspective, telling us and telling the brands and the publishers how effective was this ad for the brand, message recall, and purchase intent, things like that. And two, from a publisher perspective, how did you retain the audience through that ad break, and did it disrupt the viewing experience?
Yeah, very well. I mean, so anyone out there that's thinking of embarking on an advertising strategy and are thinking, do I need to understand my audience? I would suggest, yes, you very much do so. But I think everyone knows that already. All right, so one question from the floor. Sarah, I think it's you. If it can be, if anyone else wants to pick up on it, then great. But what goes in the decision making behind freemium versus paywall? Are women's leagues you broadcast, such as Liga F, satisfied with the freemium D2C offer?
So I explained a little bit before, but it's how can we be where the fan is?
Yep.
And basically what we're trying to do is this customer experience that we can be with the sports fan behind the paywall, but we can also be in the premium one. So it's how we can engage end to end, how we can also work in that top of the funnel. And when I think about the rights, like what we want to be is their partner, and how we can get more engagement and more views with the fans. And it's true that there are some rights that they have more engagement than others. So for those others, how we can work together with the support of the brands to get them to the same point.
Very good, very good. Okay, look, we've got a couple of minutes left. I'm definitely going to ask one, maybe two questions on the future. I think it's the best way to finish. But the first one, it's kind of linked to what we said before, but this is for anyone that is either at the start of their journey investing in advertising, or would just appreciate the experience of the panel in terms of, looking ahead. What advice would you give to brands or media owners that are new to sports advertising and want to stay ahead of the curve in what is an increasingly competitive and complex marketplace? And Sarah, we'll come to you.
Sure. I would say, first of all, it's embracing innovation. We've all discussed this. It's all about the innovation and embracing change, understanding fans' needs and behavior so that you can personalize, and be agile in understanding new technology, new trends so that you can react. So if you focus on personalization, if you focus on data and insights, if you focus on engaging and creating authentic content, and if you align your values to the fans' values, you can really create those deeper and long-lasting connections with the fans. So that's what it will look like.
Very good, very good. Anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say important to start with the basics. Define your ad products, ad strategy relative to your audience size, determine how you're going to grow that audience size, and then select the technology partners early on that can deliver that experience for you immediately.
Yeah, and I just add echoing all of this. And I think the pace at which you can synthesize data is only going to accelerate in the years ahead. So the more personalized, the more timely you can be, the better the opportunity is to connect with fans.
Very good. But I can't let you away with one final question, which is, what is the one thing that is either happening now or will happen in the next 5 to 10 years that you think will have the biggest impact on advertising in general, but in particular within sports media? Who wants to go?
I'm just going to echo my previous answer, I think, and just say I think the pace at which you can synthesize data is going to accelerate enormously. And I think that comes with endless opportunities to deliver personalization.
Well, I think first, the next 5 to 10 years, everyone in this room is going to collectively get better at delivering a stream to viewers without any problems. That will lend itself to more viewers watching streaming over IP. And then we're going to move from a kind of using data as like a post-analysis, how did we do, how did that affect audiences, to a predictive analysis, which we know what ads are right to serve, we know where to serve them, and we know exactly who we need to serve it to.
And what I would add, just to both of them, it's the convergence of technologies such AI and also virtual reality on top of all the data and what they've mentioned. It's gonna really change this personalized, richer experience that it's gonna, I think, like, we cannot even think what's gonna happen and how we're gonna live sports and how brands can be part of that experience.
AI is the obvious answer, but it's also the right answer, and it's part of what everyone said. Look, thank you very, very much. We are out of time. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And once again, thank you for coming along. And thank you to the panel.
Thank you so much.
Now, before you go, if you liked what you heard today, be sure to rate and review and just let me know what you think on social. You can find me on most social platforms as SportsPro Nick. And please do spread the word of the podcast. There's no better way of marketing than word of mouth, whether that be in person or on social media. And if you don't like what you've heard, or you think we should be doing more or less of something, then reach out and let me know, as I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, Streamtimers. Until next time.